always wanted to just create a space for people to come together, and in my head it always looked like a coffee shop. It was always like, oh, a coffee shop, a place where people can come in a comfortable setting and like be in like a cozy atmosphere and just feel like they have the ability to open up to one another.
Welcome to the Yield Coach Show, Season 1, Episode 2. All right. Here on the Yield Coach Show, we aim to bring you dynamic entrepreneurs, real estate investors, business leaders, inspirational guests ready to open up, share their story, the good, the bad, the ugly, so we can learn lessons, gain advantages, and accelerate our own success. With that, I am your host, Ian Brown. You can call me Brownie, Coach Brown, Ebo, whatever you like. I am thrilled to have Lauren Wyckoff, co-owner and founder of BrewHound, as one of our inaugural guests. Lauren is an FSU grad. She did 12 years of environmental science work. She worked for the state and federal government. She's an entrepreneur, and like I said, co-owner and founder of BrewHound Dog Park and Bar. With that, welcome, Lauren Wyckoff.
Thank you so much, Ian. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, Lauren, we're gonna keep this pretty free flowing. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I have a background, in environmental scientists, and I did that work for a number of years, mostly field work, and was passionate about it, but always had kind of like side businesses. I'd always do like little side stuff for that creative outlet. I did like a graphic design business on the side, and I did like a jewelry business on the side. I always had kind of like something to kind of feed that part of my desire, so to speak. And so, as ideas would come in, and my partner in BrewHound, as that idea came in, I was like, ooh, let's do this. And so kind of took baby steps to get where we are now.
Back it up a little bit in your story, when you were doing your environmental science work and at the Army Corps, that's a stable job, probably eventually maybe a pension track or a good retirement. What did you like and not like? I think a lot of the audience might be in a W-2 job or a government job, thinking about, do they stay in it? Do they transition? What would that look like? Give us kind of like the broad strokes of your government work, what was good, what was bad, and kind of what ultimately you said you weren't going to do anymore.
Yeah, I worked for the state, and I worked for private sector and the federal government, and that is a common theme where people are like, oh, you work for the federal government, the benefits are great, this is great, like don't ever leave. That is what society kind of tells you, that's what your coworkers tell you, that's what people in older generations tell you. But I didn't feel there's a part of that kind of work that can be constricting. And it's not just somebody telling you what to do. It's not that. I mean, as a project manager, you kind of have your own, you create your own schedule, so, in that realm. But it's just, you're not taking something that you're super passionate about and building it. And that's, I think, simply put, what I desired. And anything that you are really passionate about, you can make successful in your own way, whatever that might be. I mean, and I truly believe that. And no matter what your means are, you don't need to be a millionaire, you don't need to have a ton of money. I got a business loan, so I didn't have any money in the bank to do what, create my business. But so there's ways to do it. There's people out there to help too and mentor.
When I think about you back in the government work, it was very cause-driven. I feel like you had a passion, and you still do, for environmentalism, nature.
Big tree hugger over here.
Big tree hugger. So, what's interesting is, and you can tell us more, to make money in that sector, you kind of had to leave the government state side, right, and go private and maybe work like the for-profit developers, and maybe it felt like you weren't true to yourself in some of that development work, or maybe you didn't feel that way, but what was the give and take and kind of going from the government sector to the private? And of course, we'll get into you and your entrepreneurial journey next.
Yeah, it's a great question. That can tend to be the case. The federal government, it can be pretty lucrative working for the federal government. I mean, nothing crazy, but they do pay better than the state. And yes, there are more benefits associated with that. Lots of time off the longer you're there. So there are, trade-offs. Private sector work is a little bit more. You get bonuses and stuff like that. But I chose to work for a company when I left the federal government in the private sector that only worked on mitigation banking, which means the preservation of land and how do you enhance that functionality of that preserved land. So I had in my previous life, before the federal government, worked at private sector, which was more development driven. But this choice in this private sector piece was all working on, 90% of the time was lands that's going to be in preservation and then enhancing that land. So it was a little more enjoyable than just development work and feeling like I was raping the environment.
We'll have to edit that rape comment. Just kidding. So one thing, and obviously the audience doesn't all know this. I know Lauren very well. We went to Florida State together.
Go Noles.
Go Noles. We've been friends for decades. But we'll jump into Lauren's story with BrewHound shortly. But I've been curious, Lauren, if you picked up some of your organizational skills. When I say organizational, like leadership of people, leadership of teams, working in a large government setting and then private, because now you, and you can tell us later, now you run a large staff and a complicated operation. Did you pull some of that acumen from your days in government?
I would say, yeah, the fieldwork aspect, and when I worked for the state, the Department of Environmental Protection, I was involved with training across the state in fieldwork. So basically wetlands delineation training. So large groups of people, taking them in a classroom setting and then also taking them out into the field, into the woods, training them different, plant species and ecosystems and how they function and work within each other. So I think that was, you're taking people out into like a risky environment and like you're in charge of making sure that there's safeties and, so there's a piece of that in people of all ages and backgrounds and physical capabilities. So I think there's a piece of that in there, yes. But in college, Florida State, Go Noles, I worked at a pizza place called Momo's, which is near and dear to my heart, for 3 years. And that actually environment, I think, helped shape the kind of business or the way I wanted to interact with my staff and the way that I currently have and the way kind of work could be fun. And I think I didn't realize, to the extent that really played into what BrewHound has become.
That's an amazing point. I think a lot of us underestimate what makes us business leaders or entrepreneurs or how we felt empowered to take these steps. Mm-hmm. I did restaurant. I remember when you were managing Momo's. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can handle the chaos of running, I don't know the staff at Momo's, but
and I
that age group.
Like a shift lead, I wasn't even ever like
Oh, you were in charge. I went in there. You were in charge. So, because a lot of us, we think about our formal education, our degrees, our certifications, I honestly probably have too many of them, but it doesn't mean it makes me suited for all the business pursuits that I want to do. A lot of it, I need to meet with people like yourself or watch a YouTube video or find a mentor or take a course. So what's interesting is that Lauren's talking about her days managing a pizza joint in Tallahassee as being fundamental to her entrepreneurial success at BrewHound.
You never know what is going to add to that. You never know what experiences are going to contribute to that.
Is there anything in your family background? Are there any, entrepreneurs, or maybe the opposite? Maybe you had a risk-averse family, and you're like, "No, what? I want to go the opposite." But is there anything in your bloodline that kind of maybe if your arrow was already drawn a little more than you realized to be an entrepreneur?
I think so. My grandfather, my mother's father, owned a deli in Queens for a number of years with his brother, Greeks, so just Greek food through and through, and they had that deli for a while, and he owned actually the building that the deli was in, which was this big kind of, bringing it back to the real estate factor, like it's a big corner lot on two major intersections in Bayside, Queens, which is, pretty busy area, and he ended up selling the business and selling the building, and then of course, like a year later, it was several $100,000 more, worth more than that, so he had like heart problems after that. But so he did do that, and he owned a furrier business, I think, previous to the deli. So I think there is something too with immigrants coming over and kind of starting their own businesses, whether or not they're accepted in the field that they came from. A lot of like medically trained folks come over as immigrants, and their certifications aren't necessarily transferable to this country, so then they end up being entrepreneurs. And that wasn't the case for my grandfather, but it is interesting. I feel like that's a common theme, and yeah, they came over from Greece and ended up starting their own businesses. And so, yeah, there's a little bit in the bloodline there.
Good.
A little bit in the bloodline.
I've seen a lot of that in my real estate work and investment brokerage law. Certain communities or ethnic communities will immigrate with very little formal education or little certification, but band together, work hard, work for the next generation to have success, and just truly support one another financially, emotionally, fiscally. And I see it a lot in the hotel industry. Yeah. It's in other industries as well. It's pervasive, but it's really admirable. And that same kind of notion, people talk about the why. Why meaning like foundationally, kind of like what drives you, knowing your why. And a lot of people might lose course in their investment journeys because they kind of forget why they're doing it. This might not be a bad time to, as you look at your childhood and where you are now, what do you feel like fuels you innately inside, like for your why, your passion, because you have a lot of drive.
Thanks. Building community. I think I'm very passionate about that. And before this specific idea came to fruition, I always wanted to just create a space for people to come together, and in my head, it always looked like a coffee shop. It was always like, a coffee shop, a place where people can come in a comfortable setting and like be in like a cozy atmosphere and just feel like they have the ability to open up to one another. And so that's kind of always been my desire. And like, I always wanted, like, even in college, I like would create that in my home. And, like, always wanted to have a bigger space to invite more people into. So I think building community is my why.
That's awesome. And I can affirm that is true because I won't be able to say this about most guests, but I know this guest quite well. In undergrad, Lauren was the probably only student I knew that had a fully decked out Halloween house, the fall house, the Christmas house, all the holidays. I mean, you were like a young Martha Stewart in all the right ways and all the non-criminal ways. And that was like, it kind of felt like being home at your house. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that what drives you is community, built environment. When I say manufactured, I don't mean artificial, but an intentional is a better way to say it, an intentional environment for people to exist and communicate in a certain way. And that is really what you've accomplished, 100%. All right, we're going to jump into your first investment deal, and then maybe we can talk about getting in and through and wherever's next on your BrewHound journey. So what was your first investment property?
I suppose as I was working for the state in Tallahassee, everyone, you got a job now, you get right out of college. It was like, okay, you got to buy your property. You can't pay rent. You got to have a mortgage and own some land. So, okay. But it was also 2005, the December of 2005. Yes. So I purchased a townhome there, and the market quickly disintegrated after that. So I purchased high. So now, this many years later, I still rent it out and have renters, and it's been, it's not a very passionate journey, and it's been a long one, but for the most part, it's been pretty good. I mean, I'm now in the green. I make a little bit of profit on rent, but for a while there I didn't because I was upside down on it. But I always managed it myself and had some help with some friends in Tallahassee, and that's worked out.
I have some friends that say they know when the market crashed. It was right as they were signing their closing papers, and you might have timed it almost that right. You probably had a couple good years in there, but I bought a townhouse in 07. Was it 07? No. It was '05. Yeah.
Same.
So yeah, and so it was at least in Florida with these condos and townhomes. It took 10 years for some of these things to come back. So I like what you did. It sounds like you wrote it out. You brought in a tenant. You kind of became an accidental landlord, as some people say.
Yes, because I lived in it for a number of years, and then when I moved for a job, I was like, well, I can't sell it. So then just rented it. And the rental market there is always great because you always have students coming in.
Yeah.
So.
And you protected your credit. No short sale, no foreclosure, no judgment there, which a lot of people had to take those black eyes in the downturn.
And people suggested it too, and I was like, no, I'm good. I don't really want to go that route.
And, okay, well, good. So your first property, not a passion project, really more of that. It was owner-occupied. It became kind of that accidental landlord situation. Yep. Let's jump into some of the meat and potatoes. You have started one of the more successful businesses in Northeast Florida, down in Neptune Beach, known as BrewHound. I won't speak too much, but if you could kind of talk us through the inspiration, the genesis, and what's been maybe easier than expected or harder than expected, and maybe where you see things moving.
Yeah. So my partner Jason and I came up with this idea, sitting around, kind of. I was talking about the passionate about wanting to have a space, and we were somewhere with one of our dogs. We were hanging out in Orlando, and he started to get on the subject of, why can't you bring your dogs more places? And we talked about how you can bring them to breweries, and I was like, but that's not really enjoyable for dogs. It's more for the human aspect. And then we got into, I was like, I transitioned to why at the dog park isn't there coffee? Like, I understand maybe alcohol could be a liability. So the conversation started, and we just were bouncing off of each other and coming up with this. Now, he didn't know me as well as, maybe other people do, but in that moment, he didn't know that I was like, all my synapses were firing, and I was already like writing a business plan in my head, and he laughs about it now, but I did. I mean, we talked about some ideas, and then like the whole drive home, I'm like doing market research on my phone, like jotting down notes, writing a summary, and he's like, "Oh, okay. So we're gonna do this.
This is really happening."
Like, oh yeah. So I mean, and that's how it came to be, and the idea inception. And there's always that piece of I'd purchased a foreclosure in Jacksonville, so I was living in that home for I think 2 years at that point, year and a half. But I didn't have money saved. I didn't have a lot of liquid or assets. It was just, my townhouse in Tallahassee and this home I lived in. And a lot of people say you can't start a business. You can't, you need to have, we even went to mentors that had some free services in the city, and they said, if you don't have the same amount of money in the bank that you want to take out as a loan for your business, you cannot take out a loan. And I'm like, well, how does anybody do I don't, if you have the money, why are you asking for a loan? He's like, well, because you don't want to use your own money for a business. And I'm like, huh? So I was very confused, but I also was like, I'm also not going to take no for an answer. So I just kept chugging away, meeting with different people, calling different banks, seeing what we could get, because a lot of banks say, well, you need to be a business for 3 years before you can get a business loan. But we went the SBA route, and my good friend Ian, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he had mentioned...
Yield coach?
Yeah, that's the guy. He said, contact some of the local credit unions, contact some of the local banks. They'll be more invested in the community, potentially, than the bigger banks like Chase or those folks. And so I was like, okay. So I looked around there, and that's how I got hooked up with Florida Capital Bank here in Jacksonville. And those guys believed in what we wanted to build. We met with them several times, and so we went the SBA business loan route. And it's long and lengthy, but it's possible.
So just to unpack a couple of things that Lauren said there, she went with an SBA loan. Those are higher leverage, which is nice, because if you're, like Lauren said, if you're not well capitalized or you don't have a lot of cash on hand, how are you supposed to start a business? The SBA has loans that might go up to 90-10 leverage or 85-15, depending on if it's owner-occupied or if it's multi-tenanted. Interest rates are reasonable, and those loans exist. They have government participation to get businesses going. I think it's interesting. I kind of overlooked the fact that the local advisors told you information that for a lot of people might have just been, you're dead in the water. If you took it to heart, you might have been like, you know what? I'm never building this dog park.
And my partner did feel that way. He was like, that's it. Okay, never mind. And I was like, I don't really feel that way. So, and obviously he was supportive to continue, but in the moment, it could be kind of you're already like taking this risk and you're laying your heart on the table to somebody, and then it's like, yeah, sorry, you're not going to be able to do that. And you're like, that could be, yes, the point where you're like, okay, never mind. But we also, there's another, at UNF, there's a small business development center as well. And so also a free service. And so the folks over there also had some advice on, market research and helping you get loans or connect with the right people.
What I think is incredible
after the fact, but,
you guys have not only, you didn't have a formal business background. You're coming out of government. Jason, your co-founder and partner, coming out of military.
Yeah, he's
so
Army.
To have that duo, not a strong business background, but perfect for the SBA. What's interesting is Lauren and Jason's BrewHound is incredibly successful, a real local phenomenon in Northeast Florida. It was an unproven concept.
Yes,
so think about trying to go from your position. You've got to get this special purpose property purchased, financed, constructed, and stabilized, because for those of you that haven't done any ground up development, you have negative cash flows. So you have to either save or borrow those funds to run negative while you build and stabilize your property and you're drawing down your loan. It's probably some of the most stressful. It's speculative. It can be the highest return, but then again, here we go, somebody that just wouldn't take no for an answer. And what's amazing, I don't want to say crazy because it's not crazy, but what's amazing is you're with your dogs, you're thinking beer, you're thinking coffee, you're thinking community, and you just, by God, would not stop until there was a park built. And to have a special purpose endeavor, go from your brain to reality and do so well is just very commendable.
Thank you. And I didn't do it alone, but it was, it was definitely a journey.
So we talked about, okay, so who do you need for those that are watching that are thinking, okay, I want to build an apartment. Or I've got, some water I've been looking at. I want to build a little marina. I want to build some store. Whatever you're into, what would somebody need on their team? So you mentioned the SBA. What are the other players that the audience might need to put on their team to get their project accomplished?
Well, depending on how unique it might be, if you need a business plan, you might need somebody who has those kind of editing eyes that can review it, look at it, make sure it makes sense to somebody other than you who knows what's in their head and their heart. That could be helpful. Definitely a real estate mogul, if you will. No, like a coach.
Yeah, coach or mentor.
A real estate coach, which Ian definitely was for us in looking at property or finding property and helping secure that deal, which in itself was its own little gremlin. And if you were going to build something, which we did, somebody who's going to be in charge of that, a contractor. One of my dear friends built BrewHound for us, and she was in the custom home building field. But what we were looking at was an outside structure similar to a giant porch, which was in her wheelhouse. And so she did a beautiful job with that.
So you've got, obviously, your lender, got to bring the money. Yep. Someone needs to draw, which is usually not the same person that builds, but sometimes. So you got to have your concept drawn and papered up, as they say. Got to get it built, of course. Now, one thing that we'll unpack that you didn't mention, your property, just so people know, there's not a whole lot of municipalities out there that have a zoning that is compliant for a dog park, beer, and coffee place. Right. So maybe in Texas where there's just areas of no zoning. But talk a little bit about, some of the extra steps needed, neighborhood organizations, courting local government, getting through the planning process.
Yeah, so that was an extensive process, telling folks about something that doesn't exist. And that's not to say, when I was doing market research, I found some similar businesses that were open. One in Seattle, which was an indoor facility that allowed dogs off leash inside. There was also one in North Carolina, same. But just a handful, and not anything that we were, similar to what we were trying to do, that we had in our head. And so we met early on with the city of Neptune Beach, which is where we wanted to be, and just tried to explain the concept, what we wanted to create, and uniquely placing whatever we needed to zoning-wise in that area, going through city council meetings, answering questions from neighbors. So that is a big piece of it. Lots of community development board meetings and city council meetings, moving through that process.
And I recall, and just for those that are following along, I was involved on the brokerage and some of the legal for BrewHound, but this is Lauren's tale as her entrepreneurial journey keeps going. But that property needed a rezone. The zoning board only met like 9 times a year. And as we came into the holidays, I don't think they even had a December meeting. So when you try to do your contract, get your loan teed up to buy your land, build your park, we were losing, when I say we, it's Lauren and Jason, but I was, as a consultant agent, losing months at a time at the municipal level on these planning board meetings. So that's a takeaway that I'd like you guys to think about. If you have a property that you want to finance and build a project on, especially special purpose, you need to build in a lot of time. Here locally, most people would say you need 180 days just for the planning and zoning side. So don't put yourself in a bad spot where you spent money on architects, engineers, maybe some non-refundable appraisal deposits or loan deposits, and then you fall out of contract. You can't get any of that. None of that is refundable. So I think that's an important takeaway. I know that your park is also built right against one of the larger neighborhood associations in Neptune Beach, Florida. Maybe speak a little bit about how I think initially they had legitimate apprehension and kind of how you were able to put them at ease.
Yeah, we just met early and often with them, answering any questions they may have, building in vegetative buffers and extra fencing to do some soundproofing as good neighbors. And we just continued to say, let us know, like open communication if there's any issues. And so that relationship has been really good.
So even though Lauren and Jason, they handled their planning and zoning work essentially alone, they did a few things really well. They were early in communication. You'll hear the term community meetings in the planning world. Having community meetings, go all the way up to the mayor if you can get him or her, and they did. City council, planning board, the large HOA presidents that are adjacent to the property. Get to them early, take the lead and explain your project, because if you're the type of developer that you draw your project, you're quiet, you don't talk to anybody, the little rezoning signs go up from the city, no one really knows what's going on, you're going to have a full hearing room that has a lot of question and doubt about you and your project because you have not taken the time to expose them to it. And then you have your own words, your own time. You're not rushed. It's not a formal setting. So I commend you for for never having done that. You got a freaking dog park next to a HOA and a concept that had never been done and with wildly high support. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So BrewHound's doing well. Can you give us just what's your staff? Your hours of operation. What does it look like today?
Yeah, so we it's a dog park. We have about an acre of land, and you can come in. You don't have to enter the off-leash area at all. It's optional. We have a big old porch and a big events area, and we do tons of events for holidays, for we have markets, kind of like a farmer's market. We have, and every time we host one of those events, we're giving back proceeds to a local nonprofit, typically a dog rescue. And so that off-leash area, that's where you would pay to come in. You'd pay a membership fee, which you can even do a day pass, and come bring your dogs. We require vaccination records. Then dogs can frolic off-leash, but again, not required. They can come. You can come. No dogs. You don't want to bring any, you don't have to. You just have to love dogs because they're always there. And so we serve beer, wine, coffee, all local beer on draft. And we have about 32 employees currently. And that's a mix of people that work behind the bar and people that work in the yard, helping kind of keep that calm energy of the dogs that are hanging out there. And it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey, and we try to do a lot of things with our staff to kind of, we don't even call them that, it's like one big family, and we are constantly, team building, if you will, but really we don't even see it that way. We just kind of all hang out. We do fire nights and holidays and parties and paintball days, just fun stuff to keep us all engaged with one another, because there's a lot of jobs out there, right? But We really care about these people, and they care about what they do. And so that makes it enjoyable for everyone to be there. And then our customers feel that, like they're part of this, this greater family too, this extended family that we have. And that's been a beautiful thing.
In my humble opinion, when I visit BrewHound and I see what you've created, the part that is irreplaceable, cannot be replicated, is the community side. Somebody could attempt to create a similar facility, but what you can't create is what seems to be like the authentic community and love and support when you walk in that property. And I know this is a show that's more investment and entrepreneurially focused, but what Lauren's created is an environment where you can't fake it. A lot of people are off their phones. They're really communicating. They're having a coffee. They're having a beer. Their dogs are playing. Maybe there's a food truck. I think Santa comes to BrewHound. I mean, there's always something great at BrewHound. And what I love is, I actually didn't realize a portion of your revenue goes back to an animal charity, which is great. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs forget, if you're only in it for yourself or a narrow, small team, it's going to feel too shallow, and over time you may just wear out because you don't have a great why. And by adding a mission and adding a charity, it rounds out your why, and it really builds your community. And I think the time you spend, we won't call them staff, with your team, it shows through, because you pull into the park and the team communicates with what appears to be little hierarchy, which is good. And I know there are roles.
Poop, everyone
picks up
dishes.
poop.
Like, I'm back there. If we're busy, I'm washing dishes. Jason's picking up poop, or vice versa. So yeah, it's more of a flat. Even though we have managers and we have shift leads and stuff, it's a very flat.
If I'm willing to pick up poop, are there any alcohol discounts?
Oh yeah, probably.
Okay, good to know.
All
right, so I'd say you're at a point where you've kind of stabilized BrewHound. It's remind me, what year of operation are you in?
2.5 years.
2.5 years in, and a lot of businesses do take 3 to 5 to really stabilize. But I think you've definitely got there. Looking backwards, and then of course we can talk forward. What are some of like the takeaways or lessons? I feel like you're almost like an evolved, different person than when we first put that land under contract and you and Jason walked it.
I learn every day. Every day. But yeah, so what are some of the takeaways?
Yeah, as you look back at what you've done and you and Jason have done, let's look back more like 3.5 years, because you had to get the contract, the renderings, the rezone, you had to build it, stabilize it. So it's really more of like a 4-year look back. You had to go have that mission and
period of
have the idea.
Development. Yeah. And at no point did I feel like it wasn't going to happen. I was definitely, to me it was like just when, there was a lot of delays and things to work through. And a lot of folks come into the park now. I mean, daily basis, if not more than once a day, I get you should franchise. That would be a great idea. Or I'm going to put one of these up where I am. And, part of me is like, because people just see it and like, easy. And I'm like, oh man.
If you only knew.
Yeah, there's that piece. And then people are like, well, you did it, so I can do it. And there is a piece of that, like you could, there is pieces of like, well, now it is an established business that somebody could come in and say, yeah, I'm going to just do what you did. But my reminder in that is, you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And if you're not, that is going to convey. If it is just a business, it's just a business. And, anything that you're passionate about has your heart in it, and it's just going to feel different to those on the outside and those that, are part of your inside. So, that's been a journey. At first when I would get those comments, I would be a little offended. But now it's a compliment, at the end of the day, it's running so flawlessly to people on the outside that it is just easy peasy. And I'm like, oh, that is a compliment. That is a beautiful compliment. And the biggest, I think, thing I didn't anticipate that has been incredible, other than our beautiful family that works there or has worked there, that's, everyone's a part of it, even if they have moved on, is the connections of the folks that come to the park of all different backgrounds, age groups, and economic, everything. There isn't, I didn't realize, many spaces for people to come together in that way. You might go to a bar, and that whatever bar you're going to, people are kind of going to be around the same age with similar interests. You might go to, a Jags game, and you're going to sit around some folks, and, typically similar. But this is a place where, yes, everybody kind of loves dogs, and that's the commonality, but there's not a lot of opportunities for like a 14-year-old boy to talk to like a 70-year-old man about engineering or his life, or, and you're engaged in conversation because you're attentive to your dogs and your surroundings. So you're not on your phone or on an electronic as much. And so there's that opportunity for that connection. And then you're more in a comfortable zone because you've got your dogs now, like, oh, maybe we're talking about dogs, and then it moves on to bigger and greater things. And people have met there and gotten married. People have met there and become best friends and or just do things outside of the park. And that has been really incredible. And especially with the older generation, I get a lot of people love to tell me their stories of like their BrewHound story. And I love it. Like, I glow with those parts. But that I did not foresee. And that is a beautiful thing that has been created. I didn't even realize would come of it.
I had a couple notes on my little cheat sheet before you got here, and one of the single words I wrote down before you got here was passion, and you overflow with passion. And I think that you're cool and you're laid back in your own way, but you have way more energy and passion than I think somebody who just meets you would realize. And maybe even those that you were socializing the idea of BrewHound with 4 years ago didn't realize you're a laser, you're getting it done, and you execute. And, for those that kind of read books like Rocket Fuel or, where you split the world kind of into visionaries and integrators, Lauren is an interesting hybrid because, in my opinion, she's a classic visionary. Of course you're a visionary. You literally had a vision and got a special purpose property built with no background in it and really not a lot of capital on hand, and you made it a screaming success. But what's unique is most visionaries aren't great integrators. But here you are, and you do have a team and a partner and everything, but you've done an incredible amount of this stuff just with grit, and passion and drive.
And Jason has used the word tenacity before. I'm like, sometimes that has a little negative connotation.
I like, in my world, I like tenacity. Yeah, that's a good one. So I think people listening to this, Lauren's story is pretty atypical. Most people, in my professional opinion, if 10 people went to go get an SBA loan and try and open a BrewHound or a dog park and bar, I really think 9 would fail. I mean, it's a rare circumstance. But what I want you to see, and I don't want you to be discouraged in your pursuits, what I want you to see is Lauren's passion. She's just not going to quit. And I've had similar instances in my life where I could have easily just peeled off and maybe I'll just do like title and escrow, be a sleepy little paper pushing attorney. I could have just written appraisal reports. I'm a licensed appraiser, but I decided, I'm not just going to write appraisals. I'm not just going to broker. I'm not just going to do title and escrow. I had to decide that I'm going to laser through and push through the hard times to get to an end result that I'm proud of. And I think Lauren's done that for herself. Looking forward, you, BrewHound, your team, what do you think the future holds?
I mean, the world is my oyster.
Yes.
No, I'm definitely interested in, looking at other properties and potential, but not being driven by fear. I've had a lot of people come into the park. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build one, around the corner from you, and I'm going to, make all the money. And, as much as I'm like, oh man, but I don't, location is a big factor, and the passion part is everything. So I'm not going to be rushed into anything, but as I look for, communities to come into to enhance by building something like this, it's got to be right. It's got to feel right. It's got to be the right place. It's got to be the right time. So it is something I'm looking at, and I have been actively looking for a while, but nothing has formulated into that, BrewHound 2.0 yet. But it's definitely something on the horizon. But it's got to feel right. And again, it's just not going to be to do it before someone else tries to build one in its place. So I think that's a big factor too, not to operate in fear, to listen to your gut, to listen to your own heart, and not to do anything out of fear.
I love that. My father, rest in peace, Dan, He used to tell us, me and my 3 younger brothers, run towards the light, not from the darkness. And when I was a kid, it's so easy to dismiss what your parents say, but as you get older and you're a leader and you're trying to carry your own flag and these business efforts, man, you can feel really isolated sometimes. By running towards a goal, what BrewHound could be, what my apartment project could be, what a law firm or a capital group could look like, that's exciting. That's what should drive you, not, are we going to make it? There's $20 in the operating account or whatever, the website's down or whatever it is, construction's delayed, there's always going to be challenges. So, your passion, your vision, running towards the light, I love all that. And I also like one thing that you said, many people watching this show, they might already have some investments or a business, maybe they don't, but here you said you are ready to do another location. However, you're being strategic, you're being picky, you're not rushing it. I hope people are listening to that. I'm always looking for investment real estate. I write way more offers than I close on, and I look at way, way, way more properties than I ever write offers on. So bear in mind, this funnel, you may have to look at, in today's market, you may need to look at over 100 deals before you find something even worthy of writing an offer on. And then in my opinion, commercially or investment, in today's market, at prices that work, it might be 1 in 10 offers written that really stick. So you're going 100 down to 10 down to 1. So, you're going to have to, kiss some frogs and flip some rocks and pick your next analogy, but it's going to take some time, and you need the passion, like you've seen on today's show, to really get there. I've talked to somebody last week, and they were like, well, what about I want to get in real estate. I want to do what you're doing. I want to have rental properties and apartments and blah, blah, blah. But can I even get in right now? And I said, look, right now is a challenging time. You want to be like a black belt, not a white belt. But I say to be a good investor, you need to be able to invest in all cycles. There's times where it's going to be harder. Yeah. You got to price for downside. But in my opinion, you should never have to just stop. I also think this is a great time to work on your education. If you think it's hard to find a deal and I got to analyze 200, 300, 400 deals to find something investable, do the work, read your books, watch these podcasts, buy your courses, whatever you're going to do. But now is the time to make yourself the black belt, because there will come a time when deals come easier. If you can do a deal today, you will have success, I promise you, in the years to come. One other thing that I want to get into just with you is, who do you think was like your greatest influence? And then we're going to go from that into like your hobbies and interests. We'll soften it up. But kind of like if you had and I know you might have more than one in mind, but who's your greatest influence? And then let's get into some of your hobbies.
I will say on your last note that if it was easy, everyone would do it.
Yes.
Also,
yes.
So, in the fact of just because the market might be hard, that's where, like you said, that's where people can shine and or educate themselves together. My greatest influence. Here's
what I'll do for you. I'll give you a pause on that.
Yes.
And it could be, some people are very deeply influenced by people they never met, or they could be influenced by like a body of work, a book, a movie. I tell you what, lately I've been very influenced by, there's certain other investment podcasts I listen to that I feel like I could like run through a wall when I'm done listening to them. So I've found that I like
fantasy movies, and I feel when I watch X-Men, like I am an X-Men, and then I can do anything. Yeah, basically.
There we go. X-Men, influencer.
Yeah, X-Men. Also, just Lord of the Rings. Basically, those are my passions. Yeah.
I like it. That's not a bad answer, and I know you. I know you well enough to understand like where that's coming from. Essentially, being able to live outside of your own boundaries. And I have to say, I might not be as into like the fantasy sci-fi world as you. I will confess, but there's something about that
the
where
ultimate fight of light versus darkness.
You just stop thinking about your limitation because maybe you are like an ex-woman.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
and you do perform like beyond what most people can do. For those watching the show, as we kind of get towards the end, let's talk a little bit about like what you like to do for fun, how you decompress. We know how you give back. You have your charity.
Yeah. Well, I love yoga. I have a young little boo. He's a little over a year old, a couple weeks apart from Ian's youngest, but I don't get to do as much yoga as I once did, but that is definitely how I center and calm and now he helps me do that in other ways too. But that is definitely like an outlet for me, a beautiful outlet, because you get out, the whole point of it is to get out of your mind, to get out of your head, and settle into your heart. So that is definitely a passionate thing for me. And hiking, camping, anything outside, which, every time I'm at BrewHound, I'm outside too, but just being, connected to nature in any way I can be is definitely what I'm passionate about. Having campfires.
I don't know if I know another entrepreneur that is outdoors as much as you. It just dawned on me.
All day, every day.
I'm pretty jealous of that. Most of us have to sit, we're under these fluorescent lights in front of screens and typing and getting, carpal tunnel, in our 30s. It's embarrassing. But there you are outside, talking to people, enjoying the environment that you created. And what's beautiful is it supports you. It's a passion project and a business venture. So I think that I'm so glad you came on the show early, as an early episode, because your story is truly unique. We'll have people with big audiences and 1,000 rental units and cool things, but your story, your narrative is really unparalleled.
Well, and thank you for helping me create it.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad I could be involved. All right, so we're going to jump into a couple little goodbyes. Before we go, if you were to impart one coaching tip or word of wisdom or something for the audience, what would you tell them?
Not to be discouraged by, if you have a goal in mind, not to be discouraged and take baby steps. Like, even when people said, oh, you can't do this or that, I was still just taking baby steps. I wasn't from there going around and taking some huge giant leap. It's all, they build on one another. And if something is right, you won't be met with a lot of resistance. Now, even though this was difficult and hard and a long journey and a process, each piece, there wasn't great walls that we were overcoming. They were long-term, hurdles in the long run, but it wasn't, wall after wall. It was small thing. Okay, let me work through this, and so just baby steps working towards the goal, which never closed. There was no quicksand that we were constantly falling in. It was small steps, and it felt good. It felt positive. So just following that kind of gut feeling towards your goal, and if it's meant to be, you will make headway. You will make some leads in that.
We had a reel on the Yield Coach Instagram. It was in the past couple of days, and it was something I was saying in a different course, and I said, I don't think I've ever accomplished anything significant in a single day. And I wasn't being too disparaging of myself, but the truth is, you can only be so miraculous in one day. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that a lot of people, I'm not the first to say this, they dramatically overestimate what they can do in a day or a week or even a month, and then wildly, wildly underestimate what they can do in a year, 3 years, 5 years. So you get so narrow in your focus, you burn out because you're expecting all this huge change right away. And I think your story is a great example. I'm glad you said that, because the cumulative effect of small, intentional action is very powerful.
Yes.
All right. I've enjoyed the hell out of this. Let's tell the audience where they can find Lauren Wyckoff and BrewHound. So if you could give us your contact or your social handles, whatever you'd like the audience to know, we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Love it. Yeah. So you can check out BrewHound online. Our website is brew-hound.com. And then Instagram, it is enjoyable. I have friends, kind of all over that watch just the BrewHound stories for their emotional, therapy every day, because it's just dogs joyfully having a blast. So our stories are fun on Instagram, and we're BrewHound Dog Park Bar there, and also on Facebook, BrewHound Dog Park Bar.
Wonderful. Yeah. And you do have a great page. I love going on. I don't currently own a dog. I did have dogs in the past, and I think by going on the BrewHound Instagram, you can almost vicariously feel like you own maybe 50 dogs.
Yeah, and I run it all, so if you guys have any questions, and you message there, it all goes to me. So
wonderful.
It'll be me that's responding.
All right, now a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the show, please do us a big favor. I won't slam the table and shake the video again. Please do us a favor. Go on, rate the show, give a comment. If I'm ever going to get a sponsor, we're going to have to get some ratings and reviews. So please jump on there when this drops on Spotify, on Apple. It'll be on a YouTube channel as well. Please rate and review. It helps us actually grow this platform. If you want to follow us, we're on Yield Coach on Instagram. We're on Yield Coach for Facebook. Trying to learn TikTok. We have an account, but don't hold me. I barely know what's going on there. We're getting our YouTube channel going, but love to see you on Instagram. Message us. We'll have some upcoming events in the future. This podcast is just getting going. If you're interested in making an appearance, you can go ahead and message us. And lastly, I want to let everybody know, I hope this gave you some calls to action, some great takeaways. I enjoyed the hell out of having Lauren on the show, and I hope everybody can leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.